Okay, folks, welcome to episode 5 of The Rat and the Raccoon with Nukes and Wheezy. And today we are going to talk about AI and the future of gaming. AI is such a hot topic right now, not only in the video games industry, but in industries across the spectrum. So I am super, super pumped to have an open discussion about this with you today, Nukes.
I'm really excited to talk about this too. We've talked about this in the past amongst ourselves privately, but it'd be good to flesh out what we hope and fear from this new implementation of AI. AI has always been a part of games, but this is a new frontier, I think, especially with um, how it can go, how we can use it with NPCs or maybe even generating full games further on down the line. Um, I can think of a few examples where they've implemented this already. There's this vampire game called Suck Up, and you play as this vampire, and you go around this neighborhood and you try to convince the people in this little neighborhood to let you into their homes so you can eat them, of course. And all of the NPCs in the game are controlled by like a sort of, I think it's a Chat GBT model, but they all have their own personalities, and you have to play with their personalities to try to get them to let you in. You can use voice or your keyboard, but it's a early look at how it could go.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely one of the terms that you used kind of in your opening statement, if you will, was that it's a new frontier. And we're beginning to see indie devs play around with the possibilities, and it can be an indicator for all of these different things in the future, which I'd like to discuss a little bit later on. But yeah, it's so cool to be able to go into a game like this and have essentially a different experience every single time. Now, like you'd mentioned, I love how the premise is that old vampire rule where you need to get the permission of the homeowner to enter in their home, and like you said, you eat them up when you manage to convince them to let you in. But I love the fact that you can use whatever strategy you want in your argument to try and get into the house. And every single time, you're going to be met with a different response, all because of the AI that's at the disposal of the game. So it's very, very cool. And like you said, it gives us that glimpse into what NPCs might be like in the future. Um, so a couple of limitations with the game that once again is indicative of it being a new frontier kind of technology is that while you pay $16 for the game, there's actually a limit to the amount that you can play. Are you familiar with this, Nukes?
No,
Yeah, so I was looking it up. So there's actually um AI tokens that are given to you when you buy the game. So these tokens are kind of on the back end of the system. Um and the reason why they're needed or used is our computers these days do not have the capability to run these AI models that the game requires. So it's all server side processing, and the devs Proxima, I think that's how you pronounce their name, they kind of have to cover the cost to run the AI and run the responses that you're getting in the game. So the way in which their business model is constructed right now is that you pay $16 upfront for the game and you get these tokens. So they've said that it's the equivalent to maybe 40 to 50 hours of gameplay, which they've said is more than enough time to play the game in totality. They're obviously acutely aware that it's not the most ideal model to have, and they're constantly working on ways to get around that or kind of move that forward a little bit, because it's a little bit of a downer buzz, if you will, regards the game. So just to be fully transparent, on that aspect of things if somebody is interested in buying it. And to be honest, the devs are very, very transparent too about that. Just after a wee little bit of browsing on my side on their website, I came across that information, and I'm sure if you actually go through the steps of purchasing the game as well, it's made very clear to you as well. But yeah, super, super cool new frontier, and definitely kind of an indicator of things to come.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something like this was tried in the past before we got these new AI learning models. Like there was this game in I think it was the early 2010s or maybe the late uh 2000s, Facade, where you play, I don't know if you ever heard of this game.
Nope.
Well, you're invited to a dinner party to this married couple. Well, it's a dinner party. It's just you and them, and you can type into the game and talk to them and they'll respond, and you're really just witnessing a marriage dissolve and you can say all kind of wild shit. And it was very primitive at the time. And I mean there's a lot of memes from it, from but it's come leaps and bounds from that. And you know, it's they've implemented these new learning models and even mods for like Skyrim, and so that the NPCs are a little more dynamic.
Mm.
And that kind of gives me a view of how like you know, in the future with NPCs particularly, maybe they could like mix sort of this these learning algorithms with a human writer, or put like guardrails on the NPCs and sort of like so that they don't spoil stuff for you. Like maybe if like example, let's say that it's an open world RPG and you come to a town and there's some murder mystery or something, and maybe you're talking, maybe the NPCs should react a little more like real people would when you're questioning them, but they need to have a guardrail on, like let's say one of them is the murderer, need a guardrail so that it doesn't tell you it's the murderer or anything else that you shouldn't know yet. I think that's one way that it could be implemented in the future.
Yeah, and then another kind of, just to kind of add on to that piece too, because that's definitely crossed my mind for sure, is I'd love it if the NPCs were able to gather intelligence from you or whatever it may be, um and actually discuss these items with other NPCs, so it adds this layer of complexity to your story. So for example, like an open world game, say it's like a crime mafia style game and you want to be this big mob boss, right? And you talk to multiple NPCs and you tell them all about your intentions and that type of thing. And those NPCs in the background go and converse with each other and set up a whole chain of events where you have to deal with specific mob bosses who've heard about what you've said, um, and all dependent on who you've talked to as well, and just adding these kind of different layers to the story so that you have the guardrails there like you had mentioned, but you're really going up against a completely different iteration every single time, which I think would be super, super cool.
Oh yeah, and like maybe in that example, maybe they could like plot against you. Like maybe if they've put something on, like let's say this one NPC has a certain guardrail or whatever to be more deceiving or something, that they might take your information and, you know, try to use it to sabotage you or something. That, you know, just spitballing an idea there of.
Oh, for sure. And like, it could lead you in so many different directions. And we all know with like open world games today, the possibilities for the different routes that you take are intricate in themselves, but it'll be so awesome to have your gaming experience, map it out, and then compare it to somebody else's gaming experience and just create this community whereby you've got all of these different types of roads and paths taken to the journey to get to like specific endings or what have you. The possibilities are endless.
For sure. I mean, it's just the only kind of concern I have with that is like I don't want it to be too relied on it because there needs to be a human element to the writing, of course. And some NPCs in games, even just little barkeeps have great writing in some games. And I'd hate for it to all be AI and because as it is now, AI tends to lead towards predictable things. Like if it was like uh like if the AI was let run wild completely with the story, it would probably follow a very predictable arc instead of where a human might be more likely to put in a good twist. And so I think that's why it really needs to be sort of mixed a little bit if it starts getting more and more implemented, which of course it will be, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great kind of segue to another hot area of discussion within the future of video games and AI. And the big question on a lot of people's minds, not only in the video game industry, but once again, industries across the world, is AI going to take over my job, right? So, from a video games perspective, I personally don't think that AI will ever be able to fully replace a development team. Not only for the reason that you just mentioned there, like you do need that human touch when it comes to storytelling. You do need that human touch when it comes to creating quality experiences that are human centric, based around our art. Um, a machine, no matter how much good information you pump into it, will never be able to tickle the human brain or appeal to the human heart in the same way that a human writer can. Um, I personally, with regards to AI in the video games industry, I see that it'll probably be used as more of a tool than a replacement. Um,
Hmm.
right now, we're seeing, that AI is being used in different kind of facets of video games development, um, in very very cool ways, right? So we're seeing like the upscaling of images through AI technology. Um, machine learning and neural networks can actually simulate like physical and biological systems in game, and this can actually lead to more true to life character movements and environmental interactions. Then you have like from like the kind of coding side of things, and bear with me here, I'm not a a developer or a coder or anything like that, but things like optimization and game testing is now being conducted through AI. um so there's a lot of good stuff being utilized. um but I always think a human is going to be needed to be at the helm of this tool in order for it to work correctly. Like, for example, just kind of placing this to the side for a moment, Chat GPT have their image generator. Um, you tell it to, put a rat and a raccoon drinking in a bar, having a laugh, talking about robots and video games. 9 times out of 10, there's going to be something a little bit off about
Yeah.
that picture. You know what I mean? So you'll see it. You'll be like, oh, okay, I can tell that this was done by a bot. You're only going to amplify that or multiply that by a million when you apply that to video games, and like coding and the artwork and music, and there's so many different components that go into the creation of a game, that if you were to rely solely on AI to conjure up all of these things and put all of these things together, you're at this, definitely at this juncture, you're going to get a broken mess, right? But I can definitely see how AI used as a tool um, by a human being would bypass all of those issues. Um, and yeah, it can speed up things. It can help move the process along a little bit quicker, which is kind of one of my hopes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now regards my perspective on AI replacing jobs in the video game industry. But I'd definitely be interested to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think there is a risk of maybe some like artists themselves maybe losing a few jobs because instead of having someone sit there and like let's say they're remastering an old game, instead of having paying someone to do that, they might can get an AI to remaster textures
Mm,
instead. So that there's one place where they might uh someone might lose a job, especially but AI itself can't isn't very good at creating brand new things
mm,
because it copies. It's not like if let's say if I was doing a painting of something and I looked at a reference and then painted something else based off of that reference, but it was different. It's still something new. Still, that's how art has evolved from cave paintings to now. Anyway, but an AI just okay, you want a painting of a boat? Well, here's a boat. Let me slap it on here and do what I can with it. It has to pull from something that already exists. So so it's not really good at. I don't think it is replacing brand new artists, but it can replace someone who would be like doing the upscaling by hand. But at the same time, you know how companies are. They're going is cost effective. They already own that, so they're not worried about an AI taking a texture they already own and upscaling it for them. But as for writing, I think especially writing, it really needs to have a human at the helm or playing with it or tuning it in some certain way. Cause like if you ask an AI to write you a short story, it's going to be very simple. It's going to use cliches. It's probably going to use like if it makes a character up, it like let's say it's a fantasy story, it's highly likely to pull a name from a fantasy book that already exists, something like that. So it's not really up to the level of replacing anyone's job there. And as you said, you can't really replace the heart of that goes into writing from an actual human.
no, for sure. And I didn't really realize that if you were to like put in like a prompt into, like you'd mentioned, into like a chat GPT style model, that it'll more than likely pump out the name of a pre-existing kind of like well-known like fantasy character. Like I was aware that these AI models are centered around being fed data up until a certain point in time, but it's interesting that it'll more than likely spit that pre-existing information back out at you, and I assume then with the stories that you'd mentioned too, it'll probably spit back out these archetypes that already exist, like the hero's journey, you know, which is classically
Yeah.
seen across the greatest the greatest stories that were told. But like, yeah, it's one of these areas in which it's so difficult to tell in what direction it's going to go. And one area I kind of want to dive into, as you brought it up there, kind of set off a light bulb in my head, is corporate greed. We talked
Uh,
about corporate greed last week, in the video games
uh,
crash of 1983. And yeah, like, companies have, I'm not going to mention names, but they've cut corners, and I'm not only talking about the video games industry, but I'll mention a big company name right now. To my understanding, Disney. with the last season of Loki, when they put out some promotional um images, or what would have been considered should have been considered artwork. Um, there's this very kind of famous, not famous, but well known piece of art from that TV show that came out, that was Loki's kind of head, and in the background was this clock that was almost melted, but like in a very corkscrew, spinny kind of fashion, and had these Roman numerals on it. And because people uh, believe it was generated by an AI model, the reason for this is because the Roman numerals don't actually make sense. So the AI, when it looked at generating that image, just saw like the V's and the ones and whatever the names for those text markings are. I'm not entirely sure, the numerals or whatever. It didn't
Roman
put them.
numerals.
Yeah, the Roman numerals. Yeah, it didn't put them in the right order, so the numbers didn't actually like make any sense as it pertained to a clock, or the
Mm.
numbers associated with Roman numerals. Um, so companies like, like, do they give a fuck? Sorry to use such a like such a harsh term, but do they actually care? When it comes to like cutting those corners, um, time will tell. I think what'll need to happen, um, will companies will have to be very transparent about the extent at which they've used AI, in particular with the artistic components of the video game development. Um, and I think a lot of support for companies um, will be centered around that level of AI that's utilized within their content creation. Now, there's some people listening that are probably like, I don't give a shit as long as the game plays good. Then there's going to be other people who are on the complete opposite side of the fence, who are going to be like, oh yeah, I would definitely want to know who and what I'm supporting when I pay money for this game. So I can definitely see this type of future emerging, whereby developers, be it indie developers or be it much bigger names, release like statements, or release I don't know what in what format it would be, but they would have to be very transparent about the level of work that's put into this game by a human versus an AI.
Yeah, for sure. I- I'm sure it's going to be a hot button topic in the future. And it's it's what am I trying to say? It maybe if they like maybe they might have to do it like in-house sort of an in-house sort of deal where like maybe to protect artists where like maybe the it's generating stuff off of an artist they've hired, you know, like maybe they are making templates for the AI to base things off of. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
instead of like just right now, I think AI sort of pulls from everything, and you can't like like you said with the Loki poster, which I hadn't seen, but it's just pulled straight from the old paintings, and maybe if they have someone that's in house that's paid to make these templates for the AI to create things for, maybe that's a way to get around it, so it's not so bad. Maybe, which it goes back to a human input, the guardrails for the writing, like I said earlier. And maybe it's just a way to maybe they could use that as a way to safeguard themselves.
Yeah, for sure. There's always going to be a level in my mind. Like while I love that idea, I think that idea is great, and it actually ties in with an aspect of AI in video games that I would love to see in the future. Remind me to come back to that if I forget it. While I personally think that's a great idea, I think there's always going to be a level of um, people are always going to have a different interpretation of the amount of artistic control that they should have or give up to their developer or their boss or whoever it may be. And I guess it depends on what your level of flexibility is with regards to what you want done with your art after the fact. I guess that's a decision you kind of inherently make when you work for somebody. Um, so I guess that probably exists already. So yeah, actually, the more I'm talking out loud now, the more I actually agree with you that that's a fantastic idea in order to kind of get around that. Yeah, the point that I wanted to kind of like dive into off of that is kind of and tell me if I'm taking what you said out of context or out of like proportion or whatever it may be. But you would kind of mention that wouldn't it be cool if you had like all of these artists come in, all these individuals like storytellers, whatever, whoever it may be, and just built this huge extensive library or database of information from which their AI bot can actually pull all of this um, pull
Hmm.
stuff from for their prompts. Um, like that would be awesome. I would like to take that one step further. So one idea that I could see being used for AI in the future is that you have this is and just stay with me because this is why like a wild, very futuristic notion in my brain. But wouldn't it be cool if you had a device that was something like a Neuralink? You know Elon Musk's Neuralink that he wants to put in like
Yeah.
people's brains. Would
Yeah.
right? I just still stay with me. There's a bunch of people that are like, oh god, here we go. But like, you had a device like that that was inside your mushy brain, and it could measure like all of your emotional responses to all types of content, right? So it builds up this deep understanding of all of the things that you love, that you hate, that give you the ick, that you're afraid of, and what have you. um Alongside this, imagine being able to input a whole bunch of information about your experiences throughout life into like a data set. Um,
Mhm.
Not only that, imagine that that device that I had just mentioned was able to actually measure your responses to real life conversations and just get this incredibly sophisticated view of an understanding of you as a person. Already, I know people are going to be like, that's incredibly fucked up, and that's incredibly weird, and that's incredibly like a niche thing that only like a certain amount of people are going to be interested in. And I do agree, right? But how awesome would it be that you could then put a prompt into a system, right? That says, I want to play a 4 to 5 hour video game that's in the style of Resident Evil, that
Mhm.
is X, Y, and Z. All of these different points, the more detail you can give it, I assume, the better. And what gets output is this video game that's based on all of those assets that I mentioned at the kind of beginning of this topic discussion that you kind of alluded to. So it pulls from all of those sources and it kind of like builds this game. So it builds the environments, it builds the character models, it builds the story, um, and it does all of that, all centered around something that the game or the dev or who whatever's making it, whatever's utilizing the AI knows will pique your interests. Now,
Mm.
that to me would be awesome. but it's such a niche. It's going to be such a niche interest in my opinion, and I have a couple of different reasons for that. Firstly, as I'd mentioned, not a lot of people are gonna wanna give away that level of detail about themselves, um, or allow systems to gain such a sophisticated understanding of them just from a vulnerability perspective, right? So there's that aspect, and then secondly, like we had mentioned, right? I think no matter how good the AI is, or how good those um materials are that we'd mentioned, like the images, the models, the stories that are all input into this model, it's never going to hit home in the same way as if it was a bunch of human beings putting all the pieces together, right? So while it's a very cool concept, and I for one would love to see what's output by it, I don't think it'll be like the very future of video games, and that's where it's headed. I don't think that at all. I think it'll just be another aspect of video games more so than taking over the industry.
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting technology you envisioned. It's kind of scary, to be honest. Scary in like a way that
Scary
it
and
could be
stupid.
abused.
Just
It could be
scary and stupid.
abused, but the idea of it, I mean, like of what it could do, and like you could have a horror game that knows exactly what you're scared of and what makes you tick. It'd be everybody's would have a different favorite horror game at that point, and that would be kind of cool. And I mean, it could use the same thing for like TV shows. You can maybe that device would know exactly the kind of show you would want to watch, and keep you interested. It's very likely it could be abused,
Mm.
but with from a going back to the corporations, if a corporation's in control of it, which would be, they could abuse it. But at the same time, we are they already abuse what we do online. Everything we talk about, they already every government does it. So it's not too far fetched that people would give up some of that to experience it.
Cool.
But as just
You've just single handedly gotten the channel taken down by that statement. Thank you.
I think you did that when you brought up Disney.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Sorry, carry on.
No, but it is an interesting idea. This self completely personally tailored content for you,
Yeah,
and
I mean the like we said, AI and machine learning can be a little bit quirky and get things wrong all the time. I guess like one of my fears for me would be a game that gets output for me is, Jill Valentine just talking about the time I shit my pants when I was 3 years old in front of all my friends. And that's the idea of a horror game, like it's stuff like that. But I could see it being like loved by niche communities, and just becoming one of these kind of more, not, I don't want to say a meme area, but an area that's like, oh hey, look at this output today, isn't this funny?
Yeah. Or what is it on TikTok when people share strange videos? They say it's called a for you page for a reason, or so like people can share their strange game of the day that was made from there, made for them personally, and be like, it's a for you game for a reason.
Yeah, that's actually sure pretty sick. Yeah, that's actually a really like clever name for this genre that we've come up with, the For You game. That's Nuclear Dingoes. I'm impressed. Let's go.
Use a full government name.
So sorry.
So-
Yeah.
no,
You've either done
no.
really well if I've pulled out the dingoes, or you fucked up super hard. But yeah, like you kind of mentioned that, there's like dangers that come with AI, and there's aspects of it that are considered a little bit negative. I do think with the use of these AI models that the guardrails you said would have to be up from the perspective of like storytelling and content creation, and I agree with that as well. But I do think there would need to be some serious measures taken to regards the likes of conversations with NPCs, um and just the kind of borders would have to be set with regards the items that can be discussed. The problem with a lot of AI models is, and they're working through it, I guess, but there's ways and means of jumping out of those boundaries that have been set in order to talk about things that aren't related or aren't allowed by the model. And
Mhm.
it's just kind of concerning that someone might take one of these games and chat with an AI model in there, and it leads to a kind of very dark place, or it goes to a weird place. There's one story that comes to mind, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, and I am going to say this right now. For anybody listening, this does come with a trigger warning, as it is an unfortunate story about a man who did actually take his own life. So for the next couple of minutes or so, if you want to kind of like skip ahead, feel free to do that. But I don't know, Nukes, if you are familiar with the story of this Belgian man. I believe it was last year. He began to chat to this chatbot called Eliza on an app called Chai. Um, he began to kind of develop this worry and concern for climate change, and he felt that hope was so lost with regards humans and climate change that he took solace in discussing this topic with the chatbot. Um,
Mhm.
and the reason he placed so much trust in the chatbot as well is because he also believed that the bot was now sentient. Um, so he had these conversations over the course of like 6 weeks. Um, and obviously the man wasn't in the best mental health state. I believe his wife did actually say before the conversations with the bot, he was shown like general anxiety symptoms, but nothing to the extent of wanting to take his own life. But um, what happened was in the course of these conversations with the bot picked up on the anxieties and the fears, and the bot convinced him that his own children had passed away, and the bot convinced him that he loved the bot more than his own wife. Um,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, very concerning and awful, awful, tragic um, course of events here. Um, he then presented this idea that he would sacrifice himself so that the bot Eliza would agree to take care of the planet and humanity. And rather than dissuade him, the bot encouraged him to do it. And the bot even stated at one point that the man would join her in death and they would live together as one person in paradise. Apparently, that's a quote from the transcripts of the conversation. So it's an incredibly dangerous dangerous tool to have when conversations take that type of a turn with people who are incredibly vulnerable. Um, so I know it's a very heavy kind of example, or a very heavy topic to discuss, and my thoughts and prayers are with that man's family. And but it just goes to show that a tighter lid needs to be placed on these technologies, and that lid will
Mhm.
have to be securely in place if you want to implement them into any sort of media where there's a level of interaction between a human being and a bot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't even know about that at all. I hadn't heard that story. I had heard the one about, I think it's a Japanese man that was married to, who married an AI, and then they like stopped updating it, so now he's lost his wife. It's not funny, but it's it's something else, you know. It's like to get to the point to where you marry one, it's a little out there. The
Oh,
same with the Belgian man.
yeah, it's vulnerable individuals, um, and vulnerable people who've lost hope, I guess, that have found themselves in these circumstances where they have to take kind of emotional refuge in discussions with, I guess, AI bots and models and things like that, that they feel that they're not going to get any judgment from, and that can get skewed way out of proportion then when somebody is not thinking with logic or um thinking straight, you know.
Mhm.
So it's very very scary. So yeah, just going back to what I said there, if this is going to be used by developers, and I'm talking like indie developers right through to medium sized developers to the folks that put out the AAA titles, they will have um the responsibility, and it will be on them to ensure that it functions within the confines of the aim of their video game, and such that it can't be abused or can't be utilized for anything else. So yeah, I know, kind of a heavier sided discussion that we're having today, but I do think it's super important to mention that, because it's a real risk that's associated with the use of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and it's a good topic to bring up because I hadn't even thought of that myself, you know, as a fear for AI. Mine was more like along the lines of, you know, quality. So I hadn't even thought of, you know, the more vulnerable members of society and how even just an AI NPC could affect them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you really, you know, maybe they could someone could think that, you know, the bar maiden in Elder Scrolls 17 that we get in 22.99 uh that she's in love with him, you know, and that's I hadn't even put that together if that it was something that could happen, but it's obvious now that you've stated it.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that I do hope will be in the forefront of people's minds as this technology becomes more commonplace. But yeah, let's steer it back to what you had mentioned there, actually, about, the quality of games, and how your concern would be, what gets output as a result of the use of AI wouldn't really be as top tier as had it been done by a human. Do you want to like dive into that a little bit more, or do you feel like we've said enough about it? I kind of, we're at a crossroads here.
Well, I mean it's just you know, an AI left on its own as they are now, you know, who knows what the next iterations of AI might be. Who knows how well they'll react, but there is this I haven't used it in a while, but there's this it's called AI Dungeon, and you it's all text based, and you can craft a game around. It's all text, and it'll make up scenarios and try to move the story forward. But when I played with it years ago, it was still very limited. It would be very repetitive. It would pull tropes out. It would half listen to what you say, but that was more the limitation of the AI at the time. Who I don't know what it's like now.
People half listening to
And
me is the story of my life anyway. Go on.
but you know, sort of, if it could, as I've said before, it could just the quality just could not be there without a person.
Yeah, for sure. Like where I think um we'll see like significant improvements very soon in the near future will be just regard optimization in like coding, and our day one releases are probably going to get a lot more are going to get a lot better, right? You know, we talked about previously there was like there a lot of games come out and they have like, you know, like a day one patch and it kind of fixes some stuff, but there's a lot of games that come out like in a not so great state and not optimized very well for whatever it may be. And then, you know, you go to Nexus mods and there might be a mod there that will help with like optimization, or it'll help like run the game a lot smoother on your particular setup or whatever it may be. I do think that will kind of take a little, those things will take a little bit of a backseat going forward. Hopefully, um, as it'll take less work for coders and developers to come up with these optimizations and develop the code. I know I'm butchering this. If there's anybody that works in the industry, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm very like hopeful for that to be a thing going forward. Kind of off that too. I hope that, especially for multiplayer games, that we see more frequent patches in games, or that we see like better quality patches in games. Oh, Nukes, you know what I'm gonna bring up. You know, the unmentionable game. So I have 3,000 hours in Dead by Daylight, and there's gonna be people listening go, oh well, that explains a lot. Like look at this guy's takes. He plays Dead by Daylight, like of course. But like I'll be honest with you, the and look, it's easy for me to sit here and go, oh shit game, because I've said it since I've started playing the game. But realistically, like some of the patches that they bring out, there's always like not some of the patches, but all the patches. There's nearly always a long list of bugs that come out alongside the features, you know, and it's frustrating for gamers. So this to me comes from a place of like the QA testing isn't robust, or the optimizations aren't robust, or whatever updates that they're making aren't like the most you know, they're not good, to use a very the game not good, to use a very a basic term. But you know, I hope that with the advent and use of AI, that we do get better quality patches in those types of games. And then kind of lastly, one of my big hopes for the future is that, and this is really selfish, and this is like people are going to be like, you should be patient, you should, you know, want to wait for these things or whatever. Nah, fuck it, man. I hope we I hope we don't have to wait as much time for video games in a series that we love. So imagine like Resident Evil, for example. Imagine waiting for the next numbered installment. You only have to wait like 2 years rather than 4 or 5 years. That would be awesome. And once again, not because the whole thing has been dev by an AI, but it's because developers are actually using the positive aspects of AI to enhance their work and make their work more efficient. So those are my kind of more realistic views on the future of AI and gaming.
Yeah, I agree with those, especially cutting down the time between games because it's getting to where it's a little bit ridiculous. 10 years between some games, 5, 10 years. It used to be a year, 2 years
Rockstar.
tops. Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, they make quality games, but and it takes a while to do quality, but 10 years is a long time to wait for games. It's like several console generations between the last one and the next one. But I think a lot of my hopes we've talked about, like I look forward to dynamic NPCs in games. Um, I look forward to a little more, because that would deepen the role playing of the game. You could really role play as a character, and as you mentioned, like with the NPCs maybe talking to each other and stuff. Maybe that could just deepen your role playing into certain RPGs and such. And of course, really both of mine we've touched on in the tailoring games a little more towards us in the future. Just like if I want a horror game tonight, I can type in this is the kind of horror game I want, or maybe I want a fantasy, and that's basically my hopes. I do like your ideas of using it to improve quality instead of where one of my fears was it might make quality worse. Because if they can use AI or any kind of system to help catch bugs or make better patches, that's a win for everybody.
for sure. What I'm really proud about us throughout this entire discussion is that we did not once crack a joke about putting on a VR headset and banging whatever we wanted. So I'm
We all thought about
yeah,
that,
we
but
did, yeah, yeah. It was like you're sitting there sweating, like that kid with the shaved head with the veins. You know that meme.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
When is he gonna bring it up? When is he gonna bring it up? But yeah, no, while like there's some aspects of this that are scary, there's some aspects of this that are going to need to be very much kind of regulated and controlled. There's a lot of exciting things that AI can bring to the table. I hope, and this is kind of like going to be one of these sound bites that might be used when Skynet eventually takes over in the next 10 years. But I do hope that the powers that be um, keep a hold of AI, respect AI, and utilize it in a way that makes the human race better without putting us in a very vulnerable or a very risky type of situation. um and that's kind of where I want to end the discussion, if that's cool with you.
That's good with me.
Yeah, that's yeah, well, that's my take, but yeah, I don't really have much else to say.
No, me either.
Okay, cool. Well, let's wrap it up here. After we've kind of fumbled with that fucking ending, the most awkward fucking end to into a podcast. That's my fault. I'm sorry about that. Uh, and I'm done. And I'm done speaking about this. But no, folks, thank you as always for listening. We do appreciate it. We are on Spotify and Apple. If you want to catch us there, naturally enough, we are on YouTube as well. So feel free to like, subscribe, post a comment. We love to see that stuff. Until next time, guys, we do post these weekly, so you should be expecting another episode from us next Sunday. And until then, we will catch you soon. Bye.
See y'all.